All right, I'm just gonna move this so that I can see a bunch of people because I prefer to talk to people than to black boxes. So, hi everybody. I'm here today to tell you about my story of finding my birth parents. So I always knew that I was adopted. I was the fourth child in a family of all adopted children. So I don't actually ever remember being told. I just always knew. At the same time, I was always curious about my birth parents. It was something that never really went away. I didn't exactly fit in with my adopted family, and I was aware of that at a very early age. So, can you see why I didn't fit in? The rest of my adopted family had darker skin. They either had black or blonde hair, was very straight. And with the exception of my sister, they all had brown eyes. And there I was, this pasty white, covered in freckles, blue eyes, red hair, not just red hair, red curly hair. I stood out like a sore thumb. And it didn't help that every little old lady that I ran into said, "Wherever did you get that beautiful red curly hair?" I was constantly being told how I was different and I didn't fit in. And then I never felt that I fit in or that I belonged. Not because I wasn't loved, but because I didn't look like they did. All I ever wanted was to look like someone. When I turned 18, I tried to find my birth mother. I was provided with some non-identifying information, but the social worker told me that my birth mother didn't want to be found. So I respected her decision and her privacy, and I left it at that. I told myself it just doesn't matter. Perhaps one day I'd find her, perhaps not. Fast forward 3 decades, and we now have the internet and DNA websites. In 2009, my best friend decided that we were both going to do a DNA testing for medical purposes, since I didn't have any medical history. We ordered 23andMe kits, but mine sat on the counter for over a month. There was a significant possibility that my birth parents or a close relative might show up as a match. Did I really want to find my birth parents? Eventually, I spit in the tube and sent it off. When the results came back, I stared at the email. I actually remember this. I was with Dawn that night, and we both just stared at my phone. I held my breath as I logged onto the website, wondering if there was a parent or a grandparent or a half sibling on there. No, there wasn't. I did, however, find out that I am 0.5 black, a rare find for someone as pale as I am. Now, fast forward once again to November of 2020. Nothing new had happened, nothing was going on. But one day, out of the blue, I just woke up with a really, really strong feeling, and I thought, it's time. I just knew it was time to find my birth parents. I didn't have a clue how to proceed. So I logged on to 23andMe and started to look at my top matches, which consisted of a couple second cousins, but mostly third, fourth, and fifth cousins, meaning that we shared a set of great grandparents at best. So I logged on and started to look at the matches closer. It wasn't long before I figured out something they all had in common. They were all from Newfoundland. And not just Newfoundland, 2 distinct areas of Newfoundland. I couldn't believe it. My adopted sister had found her birth parents about 10 years ago, and she was also from Newfoundland. And just as a side note, no, we're not related. So I messaged her, and she suggested that I post my information to a Facebook called Newfoundland and Labrador Adoptees. I thought, all right, that's a place to start. Let's do this. So I posted a bit of my non-identifying information with a picture of myself in the evening of Friday, November 6th. Within a few hours, that post went viral. Over the next couple of weeks, it was shared over 5,000 times, mostly in Newfoundland. Over the next 72 hours, I was inundated with messages on Facebook from strangers, all Newfoundlanders, messaging me to ask for more information. They sent me pictures of people that they thought I looked like. And I even had messages from random men offering me a place to stay should I come to this Newfoundland and have a visit. One message even said, "Hey, my sister gave up a kid for adoption about 20 years ago. Could you be her?" Clearly you didn't read the whole post. I'm old enough to be your sister's mom, not her daughter. So it was quite a mix of messages. Two of the first people to message me turned out to be my greatest helpers. Kara, who was a very distant fifth cousin. She knew quite a bit about DNA and had helped other people search for their birth parents. So she offered to help. She is what they call a DNA angel. The next was Jane, a sweet older lady around my birth parents' age from a small town that I believed that one of my parents came from. We'll come back to Jane later. So Kara immediately recommended that I upload my DNA results to other DNA websites. I quickly uploaded them to GEDmatch, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA. Within 24 hours, I had a match with a girl who was predicted to be the child of a first cousin. Now, let me pause here to explain how DNA works. Between Kara's help, my own research on the internet, and multiple online DNA tools, I pretty much earned an express PhD in DNA in about 2 weeks. But here's how it works in the simplest terms. Everyone has a total of 7,200 centimorgans of DNA. I have no idea what centimorgans means. I just know that it's the measurement that everything is based on. Therefore, you have about 50% of your DNA from your mother and 50% from your father. So a birth parent will show up matching in the 3,600 centimorgan range. Now here's where it gets a little slippery. You'd think that your sibling would match you somewhere in the 50% range. However, it can vary anywhere from 1,600 to 3,500, depending if you inherited the same DNA from your mom and the same DNA from your dad. So when calculating DNA, there's always ranges for each relationship. I used a tool called DNA Painter. You plug in a number and it shows you a predicted relationship and a statistical probability of that relationship. So for example, if I plug in 700, you can see that it gives me several relationships with the statistical probability of that relationship. So I contacted, on GEDmatch, I contacted my closest DNA match, the one that is the daughter of a first cousin. Upon hearing that I was from Newfoundland, she made the connection that I must be her dad's first cousin. Now, he hasn't done DNA testing, but he knows who his parents are. She put me in touch with someone from that extended family, and I contacted her. Together, we looked at her extended family tree and found a woman with the same birth date as my birth mother. I looked her up on Facebook, and except for the hair, I was a doppelganger for her. We looked identical. Identical. The resemblance was uncanny. Even though little of the non-identifying information matched, a feeling of excitement washed over me. It had to be her. It had to. I was soon told that she had a profile on Ancestry, so despite my excitement, I wanted proof before I contacted her. So I sent away for an Ancestry DNA test and waited patiently for the results to confirm that she was indeed my mother. 4 weeks later, when I received my results, she wasn't my mother. In fact, We were barely related. We matched at the 40 centimorgan range, which makes her about a fifth or sixth cousin at best. And if you're from Newfoundland, you're pretty much related to everybody if you go back at least 6, 7, 8 generations. So basically, we weren't really related. The emotional roller coaster that everybody had warned me about, but I said, no, I'm good, started. Before I started searching, I thoroughly questioned my own intentions. What did I want from this? What was I hoping to find? Was I emotionally attached to the end result? Because of my prior experience, I distanced myself. And even though this search had started to become an obsession for me, it was really more of a thrill of the hunt than an emotional journey. At least that's how I felt. This was the first time that my real emotional vulnerability had been exposed, and I was disappointed. So I sulked for the rest of the day. But like a trooper, I was back on the horse the next day, more determined than ever. Ancestry didn't give me the confirmation that I wanted, but it did, however, give me a couple more close relatives, and even more important, access to family trees that people had built. I immediately messaged my two first cousins that showed up and got to work examining the family trees of some of the matches. I think everyone understands the basics about family trees, but here's how it works with DNA. First, you determine what the most probable relationship your match is using the DNA screen that I showed you earlier. Then you start to climb up the branch. You calculate how many generations ago you shared a set of grandparents. You look at their tree and you identify grandparents that at that generation. Then, now remember, for every set of grandparents, there's 4 great-grandparents. Every set of those, there's 8 great-grandparents. And they've all got 15 siblings who have sets of grandparents and children. So it's not an easy task. So you keep looking at your closest matches, and eventually you start to find some common great-grandparents. This is called triangulating your matches. Pretty soon you have a list of common relatives from your matches. Sorry, my mouth is really dry. Then you start to climb down the branch. So Ancestries and other sites will only publish names of people who have died. So you can use vital statistics, family trees, and other websites to get information. But right around 1940, there is no more information. Actually, 1945. That's when you have to flip over to obituaries. Now, believe it or not, obituaries are a treasure trove of information. You can find out someone's birth date, who they're married to, their parents, their siblings, their in-laws, their children, and their grandchildren, and where they live. And normally, the relatives are listed from oldest to youngest. This is your only way to access living relative information if you don't know them. So I triangulated enough relatives to know which great-grandparents one of my parents came from, but I was completely stumped on the other parent. I was at an impasse. Without any replies to the messages that I had sent to any other close relatives, I was completely stumped. Frustration built up to the point of overwhelming. I was hitting the low point of that roller coaster ride. It was the Saturday afternoon before Christmas that I turned off my computer and I said to Donna, I give up. There's nothing more I can do. I'm giving up. I thought it was time, but it wasn't meant to be, at least not now. I can't find them. Don't know what else to do. If new matches come up online, then I'll look at them. But I'm giving up. I have to let this go. I felt complete and utter defeat. Then, I kid you not, 10 minutes later, my phone beeped and I received a message from Jane, the older woman in Newfoundland. The message read, "I think I know who your birth mother is." Off and on over the past couple months, she had sent me suggestions every once in a while or asked some questions about my birth parents. She asked me for some more information that Saturday afternoon, and she said she'd get back to me. I gave her all the information I had, more than I had told anyone else. And the next morning, I woke up to a message with the name of a woman who went to the same high school as Jane. This woman fit the description. I couldn't believe it. All of the non-identifying information matched. I took down her information and I started to look for someone who had a family tree of this family. I put her in my own hypothetical tree and I started to triangulate my matches. One after another fit. Everything was adding up. I looked for more. After 2 days, I triangulated 9 relatives with at least one from each grandparent. So I knew it was her immediate family. With the help of Jane, I found all her siblings on Facebook, and one by one, I knocked them off as possible birth parents. She was the only one left. I had her. I had my birth mother. At the same time, I told Kara, my DNA angel, of my new discovery, so she checked out my potential birth mother. Through Facebook, she realized that this woman's husband had common friends with one of her friends. So she dug a little deeper and was able to figure out who he was. To my surprise, everything pointed to him as my birth father. So again, just like I did with her, I put him into a hypothetical tree and triangulated relatives around him. And the math worked out. Match after match after match, all added up. The only thing was, he had several brothers, and I couldn't pinpoint which brother it was. After a couple days, I was able to narrow it down to him and one other brother, but I had nothing to tell me which one was which. So I looked a little closer, and he matched the physical description from my non-identifying information. So even though I wasn't 100% sure, it was time to contact them. The only contact that I had with them was through Facebook, since I didn't have their email address or phone number. I wasn't friends with them, so I wasn't even sure that they'd received the message, but I set to work writing a letter that I never thought I would ever write. It had to be perfect. I had no idea what I was walking into, so I decided to write the same letter and send it to them both separately. Here's what I wrote. Hi, my name is Minty, and I was born on February 6, 1970. I'm searching for my birth parents in hope of receiving some updated medical information as well as confirmation, clarity, and closure. In November, I took a DNA test, which revealed several relative matches to both you and to your husband. After extensive research, I believe that you or someone in your immediate family may be my birth mother, and that either your husband or someone in his immediate family may be my birth father. I want you to know that I deeply respect your privacy. I've been as discreet as possible in my search, contacting very few people, and my newfound information will remain private either way you respond. I have so much to say, yet I'm strangely at a loss for words, as I never thought this day would actually happen. I'm now 50 years old. I have a great life. I have 2 amazing kids, and I work as both a university and college professor, as well as a corporate trainer. I'd like to learn more about you and your family. I understand this message may come as a shocking surprise. It may be a bad time, or it may be too difficult for you to deal with at this time. However, I do respectfully request 2 things: some updated medical information and confirmation or denial of our genetic relationship. Either way, if you aren't my birth parents, I'd like a response so I know you received the message and to know whether I need to continue searching. I look forward to your reply. I wish you health and happiness. My heart was racing when I sent it, and then I waited. It was a week later when I received an email from the man I had sent a message to. It read, "Wow, where do I begin? My heart is racing and my brain is in overdrive. This is a very emotional time for us. I'm sure you're feeling the same. Yes, we are your birth parents." I think that's the point where I lost it. All the curiosity, all the questions, all the frustration, they flooded out in one burst of tears. I had done it. I had found both of them. The email went on to say that they were willing to share medical information, that they looked forward to hearing from me again and continuing the conversation. They had never told a soul about me. Not their parents, not their friends, not their family. They hadn't even told their own children, my two brothers. I assured them that I had been as discreet as possible and I would maintain their privacy. I had no desire to out them, and their secret was safe with me. They told me that my return to their life would take some considerable thought and soul searching on their part to decide how to move forward. I understood, and I gave them time. Since our first email exchange, we've shared information and stories. We've even shared some pictures. In the beginning, all I wanted was to look like somebody. The irony that I don't actually resemble either one of them, but I'm more of a mix of features, is not lost on me. But somehow that matters less now. We've continued our email exchange, and last weekend, they told me that after the COVID lockdown ends, they'd like to meet me. They also told me that they've decided to tell their families about the daughter that they gave up for adoption 51 years ago. I haven't heard my birth story yet, but some stories are better told in person. Throughout my entire life, and definitely through this search, I never allowed myself to feel any hope. I never allowed myself to imagine anything more than them providing medical information and polite, "We don't want you in our lives." I was completely armored up for disappointment, denial, and rejection. I couldn't have hoped for a better result. I liked them. I really liked them. They're intelligent, they're kind, they're compassionate, and most importantly, they have a great sense of humor. They are my roots. They are my people. All my life, all I ever wanted was to look like someone, to know that I belonged to someone. Going into this search, all I thought that I wanted and expected was clarity, confirmation, and closure. And what I found was two people who have loved me my entire life. What I found was more than I could have ever imagined. Not only did I find my roots, I found family and connection. Thank you.
Very powerful. Thanks, Karen.
So it's still pretty fresh.